I realized that it is us, the conference, who are here. So Diana has just graciously said that she had prepared all her slides in English, but she was going to give the lecture in Spanish, but she has just told us that she will actually do it in English. So, or is there a preference? Everybody's bilingual in the audience right now. Oh no, not everyone. Yeah. Okay, ¿qué prefieren? Perdón, para Tlatelolco. Español mejor. Ok. En Stanford también está bien en inglés. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we'll do it in English. Okay. So welcome everyone. I'm Alberto Díaz-Calleros, Director of the Center for Latin American Studies at Stanford University. We have today we're hosted by CECUT, the Centro Cultural Universitario Tlatelolco in Mexico City. And this is a presentation that closes our first day of a seminar that we've been holding with the London School of Economics, the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, and Stanford, the Center for Latin American Studies at Stanford. So let me introduce you our speaker today, Dr. Diana Magaloni. She is the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA Deputy Director. She's the Program Director and Dr. Virginia Fields Curator of the Art of the Ancient Americas. And she's also the Susan D. Booth and David D. Booth Conservation Center Director. She's the former Director of the Museo Nacional de Antropología in Mexico City. During her tenure at LACMA, she has been very important in, finding the kind of giving a bit more substance and order to their ancient art collection. She graduated from the National School for Conservation and Restoration in Museography of the Mexican National Institute for Anthropology and History, the INA. She earned her MA in Art History at UNAM, her PhD also in Art History from Yale University. She has curated a series of exhibits at LACMA. Her latest exhibit is a dual exhibit called Mixpantli, Space, Time, and the Indigenous Origins of Mexico, and Mixpantli, Contemporary Echoes. And she has a newly inaugurated exhibit called The Portable Universe, El Universo en tus Manos, Thought and Splendor of Indigenous Colombia. So Diana, welcome. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hello, everyone. I hope you are not too tired, no? ¿Cómo van? ¿Un buen día? Okay. Well, la próxima. I need to tell them. Próxima. Okay. Bueno. So, English or Spanish? This is the general history of the things of New Spain, also called the Florentine Codex. And this is one of the most amazing pieces of work that the world has, for me at least. But it actually is one of them. It was made here, right here, when you see, have you seen the site and the church? The church, of course, it's newer, but it's in the place of this Colegio de Santa Cruz Tlatelolco. And that church was placed on top of the ancient Tlatelolco, civic and religious center. So it is so nice to be giving this conference here, right when this happened. It happened in a moment. We can go to the next one. The Florentine Codex, it's an encyclopedia. Just imagine 16th century Mexico, Tlatelolco, that you are a Nahua scholar studying there. You were not going to be able ever to become a priest or to have any real power, but you were holding the knowledge of who you are or who your people are at that moment. A knowledge that by that moment, the crown, the Spanish crown, had decided to destroy, because it was not convenient for them to have a República de Indios, no, an indigenous republic, as they were organized. And one of the things that in 76 happened is that the crown issued a law against any indigenous language publication. They will be persecuted by the Inquisition. Many of them will be burned. And the crown targeted specifically this because it was an encyclopedia of everything in New Spain. A great history book, but more than a book, a great container of everything that was their knowledge, their past, their present, and their future. So anybody who was doing that knew the importance of the book. And here you have it. It's just like any encyclopedia at that time. You would think that that is handwritten text. There are more than 2,000 folios. That means 4,000 pages, because the folio, you have the recto and the verso. And so when you number 2,000, they don't number the verso. No? And so it is 4,000 written text with 2,868 images painted by hand to imitate what was happening in Europe, that it was a printed book, no? And it's just amazing to me. So it is a text that the original is in Nahuatl. Not everything is translated. Many pages in Nahuatl are not translated into Spanish. The Spanish translation was made by Bernardino Sagún, who auspiciated all this work. And so he was actually deciding what to translate and what not to translate. And this was made in a little bit of haste because it was persecuted. They were doing it in the College of Santa Cruz. And by 76, they had the money in 75 to buy the Spanish, to buy the paper. They started writing, they started working, and in 76, a huge sickness, you know, Alberto must have talked about it, no, not yet. Rodolfo. Genial. Bueno, la gran epidemia de Hueco Colistli hit Mexico, the whole Mexico plateau. And many people died. Many people died. So anybody who would have stayed to produce these would have decided to stay and give the life, your life, and probably the life of the people who you could have cared for. So this is what this codex means. It's a history of cultural survival in a moment that a community comes together and creates this. And it's in Nahuatl, in Spanish, and the visual text. I call it a text because before the arrival of the Europeans, there was writing, but writing was made through images. And images were not only writing as you know, syllabic systems like the Maya and some of the Nahuatl glyphs, but they had also this very syntactic and conceptual way of communicating the origins of things and the reason why things exist or are a way or the other. So all of that couldn't have disappeared because they were painting with a style that would have appealed to the European audiences, no? Because Sagún thought this was gonna convince the crown that these people worth, he calls it, they have a quilate, no? They are worth of keeping, of respecting. So the purpose of this was so that the king would be respecting, but at the same time, the king wanted to destroy it. So it's also a very tense, important moment. The next. So here's what I just said. The next. Bernardino de Sagún, whom I admire, and I think he has the codex there. And so he's the main author. We know the Historia de las Cosas de Nueva España by Bernardino Sahagún, but he didn't write it. He translated. He took all that information for many people who were writing. So the next one, the only part of the authorship that we could mention is these 4 grammarians, Sahagún calls them. Antonio Valeriano, who by that time was the governor of Mexico, Mexico City, Alonso Bejerano, Martín Jacobita, and Pedro de San Buenaventura. And there were other two scribes. But who created those 2,000 images? I mean, they couldn't have been there. Sahagún, for sure not. They, only 4. So the next. There's a way, and this is a very art historical thing to do, there is a way to recognize the hand of an artist. Actually, like, there's an article by Serge Grusinski that compares Freud, Sherlock Holmes, Freud, Sherlock Holmes, yes, Freud and Sherlock Holmes, about the little like clues you can see to understand things that otherwise you wouldn't, no? And that was applied in the collection of Renaissance art, mainly by Europe, like English and Americans. Because, for instance, if you think this is a Botticelli, if you have a very good copy of a Botticelli, how can you for sure say that this is not a Botticelli if you don't have like all the scientific analysis? There are little clues in that painting that will tell you that it's not a Botticelli. For instance, let's say, I am just creating the idea, Botticelli doesn't paint the little rig in the nail. He never does that, or he always does it. Those little details that like only if you study systematically and observe all those little things that would be unconscious, that is why Freud and Sherlock Holmes with this. So that is how you can understand how many artists participated. So you just need to be very systematic and choose those details. And for the Nahua painters who were doing this, it's very much the profile. Look at this profile, how it starts from the forehead and how different is the other one. The way the eyes are drawn, if it has a pupil or it doesn't, because it's very consistent. And you start to recognize the painters, name them like that. And I created a database after systematizing all these observations. And the next one, la próxima. A friend of mine who's a statistician helped me to create this. So you have the 12 books, and then I promise that always happens when you study anything pre-Columbian, any mural, anything that I've studied that I am supposing, this must have been the method. Nada. Like, would you call this a method? Like, I was thinking, the verso was, no, the recto was painted by, like, if I would be them, I would say, I paint the rectos, you paint the versos. This is the subject, no? Here, you don't see that. Like, in book 1, there's painter 3, painter 4, painter 1, like, the only thing that you can say about this at the end is that they are acting as a corporation. Everybody knows exactly what to do. It doesn't matter what book you're painting. It doesn't matter what subject matter. You know you know exactly what to do. So that is why they are not naming the painters, because the whole group is what matters. It's a cohesive corporation, no? I don't know to call it corporation, but it's a cohesive group. And then the other part is that there is a master here, like the green, no? This master. There are 4 master painters. And when I went back to compare what images they were, I found this. The next. Well, before that, or maybe I won't get, yes, I think I get into it. Why didn't Sahagún call up the painters? Why didn't he mention at least that? No, he called them grammarians. It's very much, it's so important in rhetoric, grammar, no, philosophy. He was not thinking that painting was a rational art. Painting for Sagun, in a very medieval way of thinking, not in a Renaissance manner of respecting painting, he was thinking that painting was a mechanical art. So he didn't think it was an intellectual pursuit. Maybe that is why there are so many paintings, and he allowed those paintings to be there. Because if he would have thought that those paintings were rational and intellectual, and that they might have created a threat, no? Because they would have been heretical. So for him, those paintings were completely innocent, only a mechanical art, only an embellishment. But for the Nahuas, their tradition was not from the 7 liberal arts, although they knew it. They were studying that here, right here in the college. For the Nahuas, the tradition was the next, la próxima. Intlili intlapali, that means, intlili means the black, intlapali means the red or the colors. Just like colorear, colorado, it's red, or los colores, porque es colorear, no? It's exactly the same. So intlili intlapali, if you think, where is the black? The black, it's all around the perimeter. It's the, no? It's the line that creates the figure. And the tlapali, the colors, are exactly what illuminates within it. So in Tlili Tlapali, the method of painting, it's knowledge. It's thought and memory. These two things together, it's what they think knowledge is. So painting is creating knowledge. And the other thing that it's important to think about is what is knowledge. Knowledge for us is something that you study, it stays in the books, no? But what is knowledge? What do you want to create that? That is the other part of the question that I wanted to answer, because if you are describing knowledge with black and colors, ¡ay, fantástico! Ah, como... Ah, es esto. Okay. So, what is knowledge? Let's keep that question in mind. If you're describing knowledge with the black line and the colors, then knowledge would mean something different than a written text, no? That what it is for us. So let's not assume anything and just try to find it in the evidence. La próxima. Gracias. I just wanted to give you an overview. This is book 1, the gods. Book 2, the ceremonies. The next one. 3, it's the origins of the gods. It's super nice. It's about mythology. 4 is this divinatory calendar that is really persecuted by the Inquisition. And it's amazing that there are paintings there, but there are many scenes that are not painted. Next. La próxima. This is a very interesting book, The Sun, the Moon, and the Stars. It's really trying to create a new way of conceiving the cosmos, the earth, the sky, because they are studying the Ptolemaic astronomy, and they are translating their knowledge into this new Ptolemaic astronomy and renaming their constellations and repainting them, recreating. This book 8, it's really a history. It's a history of all the rulers in central Mexico, of many, many different city-states. La próxima. The merchants and the crafts, it's very much about New Spain and the new organization and what they are doing and how they are now working in silver and creating a Virgin of Guadalupe in silver. Like, it's really very much about how this knowledge of the merchants and the craftsmen, it's adapted to this new reality. And book 10 is the people. This is a very Renaissance topic. Like, the good Mason does this and this. The bad, it's very much in the lines of like the structure of knowledge in Europe. But it's great. It has amazing descriptions. The next, the Indigenous Natural History of New Spain. I call it like that because it's like in that moment to write a natural histories were written really were imperial. The different kings in Europe would send their cartographers, their royal cosmographers, to create these histories. So for these humble Nawa painters and writers to have the the courage that I'll do my natural history. Every single being that exists is in this book. Ants, worms, butterflies, worms in your stomach, like everything that exists is painted in this natural history. And I think it is really a political act on their part to have written that. But it's not called the natural history, it's called the garden. And, it's just like an aphorism, just like that. And then a book that really caused Sagun to have to write another book saying that all that was said there, it's not true. It's the book that retells the conquest of Mexico on the eyes of who fought the war on the side of the Tlatelolcas. And it's an amazing book. And so this is what they were doing between 1575 and 1577 when this book was not finished. The last 10 pages of the Book of the Conquest, the books were done in order. You can see that when you have the book in your hands. They are empty. So there's the evidence of that they have to close shop and take that book and hide it. And we know it went to Europe. Francisco de Sequeira took it with him, but we don't know where it ended until very late, like years later, like 20 years later, that we find it in the collections of the Medici, who saved the book, but we don't know how it got there exactly. The next, this is, you can see it more here. This was happening here in these years. The next, and the pandemic. So when I was studying the Florentine Codex, I read it from 1 to 12, and I was reading, of course, the Spanish, because then I would have continued to read them with all the dictionaries. It would have been very difficult. And I just found this quote, and it really struck me, because Sagun is writing in third person. The roads of Mexico go from here to there to the, and all of a sudden, he's forced to change. And you have a little bit of the sense of the gravity of what is happening. No, they are dying from 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 70, 80 die every day in this pestilence. They die of hunger and thirst because there's no one to give a jar of water. Like, so for the painters who stayed here, closed in, not to get contagious, it really meant to give their lives for something that now we have the privilege to see and to investigate and to just peek a little bit into that history. And I think we can relate after the pandemic we all have gone through, not in this extreme, because we have Zoom and we have many things, but we can really relate much more to what would that have meant. The next, here it is, and thank you. I really learned, this is 1520, when we know this is smallpox, and Beto pointed this out to me, that in book 6, the Hueco Colistli is painted very differently. Not with these puzzles, round puzzles, but with these other ones. So we have in the Florentine Codex the mention of the 1520 painted, 1545 when Sagun almost died, and then the one that really destroyed the central Mexico, 76. And it was, it was this bad luck when the king is changing its policies towards the Americas. Everything that was created and that could have been was destroyed by the pestilence, together with the Hispanization and the, like the indigenous communities and people became really like out front people to exploit, to use, in these early modern times where, our system of production started, or I don't know. But it's really sad, something that could have been, and they are aware. The painters are really aware of what is happening politically, and this is their fight to leave knowledge. So that is one of the reasons, or one of the answers. Knowledge means this, the survival of a culture, not of what you think, but of your people, of your traditions, of who you are in the world. The next. And I give thanks again to Beto, who here, people die coughing. The next. Here are the cédulas reales, no? That were establishing that you were not gonna, no, that no indigenous language was allowed. And the Historia de Bernardino de Sahagún, it's targeted. So we have like the Royal Ordinance of 77 saying these things. So imagine being them, no? Like you are locked in, producing these, you are hidden, and all of a sudden a new layer comes and hits you. And the next. While this is happening, they are painting like this. It is book 11 where we saw the quotation. It is book 11, therefore it must be early 77. And just observe a little bit. This, whoever, like the painters were recreating something that was happening in Italy or in Flanders. It wasn't happening in Spain, but of course Spain that in that moment had this power to but this is a very, like, it's so modern for their time. The blue here with all these colors is creating a perspective, an aerial perspective. And the coyote, you see, it has this line that it's incredibly accurate. And at the same time, the colors are creating the volume. But he is placed in a way that even if this is, let's say, very realistic, very naturalistic, it's played in a way where you are, it's like a wing telling you, I am creating this. So it's the recreation of nature. There's an intellectual potency in here. Painters were discussing these possibilities, how to represent nature, what it meant. It was really the first time painting became a rational art because it could imitate nature, play with it, change it, propose a point of view. This one too, here with this little, you have the frame that it's telling you it is a representation. And not only that, the peccary is stepping out of the frame like, here I am. And at the same time, look at this. This is a papalomichi, a butterfly fish, and this is a ocelomichi, an ocelotl jaguar fish. And they are in these currents of the great waters with this Maya blue. All of this is really coming from pre-Hispanic times. They are hyper symbolic. These are magical fish. They are actually representing the warriors who fought and died. They are actually representing that they are now fish. They would have been, if they would have won, they would have been birds in the paradise of the warriors who are the winners. But these are the paradise of the fish. They have become fish. They have they are in the depths of the underworld, that it's a creative underworld that one day will research. So this is their portrait. So all of this is happening while there's pestilence outside. The ordinances are persecuting. So the painters are doing this, but very likely the community that survived or is surviving or is striving to survive are protecting them. So, no, because we know the Spanish were not sick. They were continue to deal with life as normal. So they would have been able to come in the college and take them all, no? And I want the book. So I think we have to imagine that this is a communal survival, that it is not only happening in the school, but it's happening in Tlatelolco. The next. So the world becomes black and white. The colors end from this to that. And so that is one of the questions to answer. The next. Even if it ends, when describing Quetzalistli, this very important, precious jade that has a very deep green color, that it's just like petrified water, you know, it has all these textures and you know that it's Quetzalistli, its name, Quetzali, no, these feathers, and Istli, obsidian. So you know that this is the name of this, but the name is also describing the color, just like the Quetzal feather and the shininess of the obsidian and the darkness. Hilosuchitl, it's a very important ritual flower, and you know that it was red. Right here you have a ladybug with these little dots, just like these little dots. So you can imagine this is red, this is black. So even though the colors don't exist anymore, they continue to paint them. So just to think of what they are doing intellectually and why. The next. La próxima. Gracias. The same here. I love this, the apasonali, that is the amber. You know, it is like fire, but amber is transparent like water. So you have these two things describing the material. So it is not only the color, but the material itself. La próxima. And this is a way to describe the colors. The colors can be very transparent, like this. If you make a mistake, here it is. It's completely transparent. They are dyes, no? The next one, la próxima. Or they have these powering mineral pigments that have covering power. And this is the only European pigment in the whole Florentine Codex. So they can be or minerals with like powders. Maya green and Maya blue are very specific to Mesoamerica, but they are powders that have these, they really hide the black lines, you see? Or like in here, you have cochinilla here, but also cinnabar. The next. Gracias. And in book 11, in this natural history, we have los colores de todas las maneras, the colors of all manners. And you have where they grow. You see the Iztaccíhuatl, the Popocatépetl, this is growing in the Valley of Mexico. I mean, from the standpoint of the Popocatépetl to the right, it's in the valley in Cholula, exactly. And here are the bugs, no, the cochinilla bugs, and here it's him who produces these cochinilla bugs into a sort of stone that is here, and he is the painter using that in a very Novo-Hispanic place, no? And he's using the matlali. And as you see, there is no process for the matlali. The matlali is a flower that grows when it rains. It even grows in Los Angeles. But you have to take them petal by petal and then like press the juice and use it right at that moment. Because if not, the color disappears. And it's this fine blue. And there is no process. Here, there's a lot of process, and you could save these. He uses it after, but not here. It's just immediate. So those paintings are really describing processes that if you don't know how to make them, you wouldn't know how to reconstruct them. But then if you need that blue, that fine blue, and the pestilence is outside, everything, how would you go about going if you are persecuted, if there's sickness, to go and take the petals and use it for paint? So then is when you start to understand why the pigments ended. No? The next one. So here is the matlali, for instance, this color. The next. The Zacatlascali, there's a whole process, and you can save some of this yellow. This is the ink for writing, Nacascolotl, that comes, this really come from lower down, like Cuernavaca, like where the climate is, it's more tropical. And you can see the whole process, and here he's making it. And he who's writing this, he's dressed as a Spaniard, no? So they are really selling that to them, to the Spaniards too. The next, and we are in the Biblioteca Medicea Laurenciana. I think this is a design by Brunelleschi. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And right in this door, I was there every morning for 6 months, knocking and being there studying the codex. The next. And after those 6 months, I decided like where to analyze and what were my questions about the colors, etc. And thanks to Dr. Piero Baglioni and his team, we were able to bring these equipments to the Biblioteca and do the analysis of the pigments. The next. And after those analyses, when I came back to Mexico, I worked with Lilia, Felix, y Arturo to recreate the recipes as much as we could, to have references. Because once you analyze things, they come in these graphs, and if you don't have any reference to what to compare it with, then you don't know what they are. Some of them you can know, like chemically, but this was the best way to really be sure that what we were identifying was exactly what we were thinking. And it was a process where I really learned that it takes a long time to do these pigments. The next one. So here are all the colors that you can create with cochinilla. If you add acid, if you change the pH to acid, they become like this. If you change the pH to basic, they are like that. And to have this, it's completely stabilized. It's very, very difficult. They change. I mean, you breathe and they change. So the stabilization of those colors, it's a lot of work. The next one. This is, to have this, create this color, this needed to have been soaked in water for 7 years. Palo de Brasil. So then is when you start to understand, if this is finished, how do you recreate it once everything has collapsed? The next one. Perfecto. So here is the Palo de Brasil. All these, you see all of the colors that you can create with only one dye. It's incredible. The next one. Zacatlascali. This is a parasite that grows everywhere in the States. Here, it has to be mature to really create this color, but here it is, the tortillitas that we recreated. The next. And you can, again, changing the pH, you can create all of these colors from very yellow to brown. Next. And the minerals were described differently. This is hematite in a cave. This is the white under the lake. And in the Nahua worldview, in the Mesoamerican worldview, these are places that are called the underworld that are very different from the solar world. The underworld, it's a place before history, before time. It's perennial, and everything exists there. It has, the moon has that power. It is the night. So pigments are, the minerals are related to another different kind of materials, while the flowers were all, they all grow, no? Because of the sun. And that was one of the things that the paintings themselves were telling me. The next, here are the pigments. The next, these are from Teotihuacan, these are original. And here is book one, the next. And you can see book one with the gods. It's very similar to a Central Mexico Codex Borgia, but with a different kind of use of colors. This is much more potent, this is red, but they are using the same format. The next, the texts are written with this iron gold ink that we saw, but everything else, it's painted with a black carbon ink. So they are differentiating two different kinds of, for the Intlilin this is one black, and for the rest of the writing, this is another kind of material. The materials are actually signaling different things. The next, this is a new way of communicating something that has been communicating all the time in the creation of the gods. So they are recreating the world in this new light, in new Spain. But this is as valid as it had been all through the centuries. The next, and in order to create that, they really use the pigments to give them their kind of their identity. The next, and we can see here in the Tonalpohualli, many of the, all the red you see here is a combination of two reds. Can you change the next one? This is cinnabar, it's a mineral, and this is cochinilla, that it's an insect. So they wouldn't have, like, why would you need two reds to paint these? The next one, this, the dark water telluric underworld with the water, it's dark. Then the cosmic tree that raises up the sky and creates day and night because the sun can come in and illuminate the earth. And everything that grows under the sun has the power of the sun, and everything that is dark, watery, telluric has the power of this other world. And together, it's the only way to create the world. So those pigments are used not only to give identity to these images or to create knowledge, but actually to make a world live again. It's an act of creation. It's not only an act of representation to paint. And we have many examples like this with, this is the calendar, just to tell you that all these dots are the days. And I love this example in Ometochtli, to rabbit, the day in which the borrachos were born it's the only one in which they use minium. Because borrachos, like to be borracho every day, it was one of the things that, as a consequence of the conquest, because before you could be borracho in the certain specific festivity, and everybody was borracho, but not like, not like, let me have my scotch. O sea, no, not like that. And the pulquerias started, like, they started selling pulque, and the priest, like many of the priests say that it's like the seventh epidemic, because so many people died from depression and alcoholism. And it's really the influence of a new time, a new sun, the sun where the Spaniards are here. So the colors are not only coloring, they are giving an energy, a specific energy of the specific time. And this book has the time of the past, no? And has the time of the present. And in a sense, it also has a time of the future. And that is, I think, we can end it here. I think it's a very good way to end. Yes, of course. I didn't want to take so much time. Sorry.
The people involved in the construction of this piece, you focus on the paintings, right? But I don't know if the writing is insightful, right? Is it just the letters of the same person, or probably not, right? Right. And is there any idea of how, I mean, beyond the number of people, like how were they organized? Like usually, I mean, I don't know, I guess in indigenous communities can be like some spontaneous order, some like natural way of doing things, but it feels that an organization usually needs a leader, like who was behind bringing structure, that this was like a book composed of these units and that there was like thematic, like unity. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, thanks for this fascinating talk. I was wondering like a million things, but to be precise, one or two, the question of ownership. I mean, I guess you were a bit showing where this was in Florence, and now with the whole discussion of the Penacho and Moktezuma and all these things, like, should it be here, there, somewhere they preserved? Like, is that a question that is studied as well?
I think that is a very difficult question to answer, but if it wouldn't have been for the Medici, this would have been destroyed. And the Biblioteca is it's the first public library ever in Europe. And the Codex was consulted, as you could have been there and consulted. And they still have that spirit, and they take care of it very well. And I am happy with it staying there, because it is its place of survival. No, I mean, it was this relationship between the two worlds.
And then the other thing is, given the level of detail of some of these illustrations, have they been used to study like which animals went extinct, which plants were extinct, of things that were described, but then, but
You know, the Codex, it's so big that in the beginning, it wasn't known with the paintings. It was there, the Métis had it. Sagún did another manuscript, the Tolosa manuscript in Spanish. And that was what we were reading for, I think it is like 10 years ago that the Spanish of the Florentine Codex was published by Alfredo López Osti, like only 10 years ago, even less. And so we were only reading the Spanish text by Sagún and calling it La Historia General de Sagún, and nobody paid attention to the images until I started studying them. And now, fortunately, there's a focus on that and on other documents. And I think it would be a great use. It would be a great use to use it as a scientific publication, not to see.
Somebody raised his hand here. Thank you.
My question is very broad, but you mentioned that there was this perception that this kind of painting was very mechanical, not rational, or not very intellectual. But do we know something about the perception or the relationship between painting and the native population, how it was embraced or approached? Because there is, I don't know anything about this, but
No.
there is like a long tradition of these illustrations.
So what I was trying to say is that for Sagún, being him a priest from the Franciscan order, they consider like what Michelangelo did, what happened when Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli were painting this, was not only that they were painting and they were researching nature. They were researching nature by trying to understand its proportions. Like the fact that you could imitate nature meant that you understood nature. Before them, that didn't exist. And the painting, the medieval painting, was an iconic painting. It was a religious painting. And the painter didn't have anything to do with what you were painting. It was only a tradition. You should paint Santa Barbara in this way with no? And that the act of painting itself was thought of as, in Europe, a mechanical art. The only rational arts were the 7 liberal arts, the trivium and the quadrivium. So Sagún comes with this theory and with this baggage to the New World and sees these painters who are incredibly talented, who immediately learn how to paint with these new techniques and this new style that came from a completely different tradition, where painting was actually creating knowledge. That is why I have these two things together. So Sagún, thinking that painting was a mechanical art, didn't even suspect that those paintings had that content in them, that what they were doing is making their world survive through them. He wouldn't have even imagined. Maybe I don't know, Dürer, because they were, like, what amazes me is that the painters were really informed of a discussion that was happening in Europe in a moment where Sagún was not even aware of that, you know? So it's that they were aware that painting is a rational art. They were aware. They were Tlacuilos, almost like they would have been conversant with Dürer and Michelangelo and Leonardo, and they could have been discussing what they were discussing. But the priests were not aware. It took a long time. This discussion took a long time in Europe to be accepted. Took a long time.
Thank you for this wonderful talk. I think my question follows from what you just said. It's about the reception of European art here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at this, there is a lot of variation, things that are very, look like, pre-Hispanic, but even those are very different from the Codex Borgia that you
Yeah.
showed. And then there are things that are really close to the art as practiced in Italy or wherever, right? So how did that reception happen here? What do you or we know
What do we know
about?
about it?
Yeah.
So-
And who were the ones that, since the priests, as you said, were unaware of these things, who were the agents of these kind of syncretism, or this transformation of the art and this meeting of these two worlds?
I think the agents were the indigenous painters, but the, the, the Franciscans had a school, Pedro de Gante had a school, San José de los Naturales, where the kids were taught to paint. The indigenous kids were taught to paint and to do sculpture and to be conversant with the European way of representation. And it was the age of the print. So a lot of prints came. And the School of Santa Cruz Tlatelolco had an amazing library, had a very important library. They could have seen, mainly the Bibles were all illustrated, especially the Apocalypse. But they couldn't be part of the gremios, guilds of the Painters Guild. If you were indigenous, you couldn't be a priest or be part of the guild. But they had the group of themselves. And because, of course, there were not so many painters. There were famous Spanish painters here and criollos painting like Europeans. And the indigenous were painting for themselves, for their little churches. If you go around Mexico, it's still full with that production for the missionaries, for the churches, for their little towns, for their chapels. They produced so much, so much. Even oil painting that was, in a sense, not allowed for them to do, they were doing it a little bit outside the norm. So they were very, very fast learners because that was the world they were living in, They couldn't have painted as in the past because it was really a heretical image. They would have been persecuted by the Inquisition and probably incarcerated or killed.
We have to wrap up, but I do want to ask you a question. All of them have the Arqueología Mexicana special issue. Could you tell us, just in closing, about the Moktezuma, the colors used in the Moktezuma image? Oh, you have it? You have it there?
I have it here, but I stopped because it was late.
Yeah.
Yes.
You won't tell us. Oh, you need the image. Oh, I'm sorry.
¿Puedes pasar bastantes a ver si llegamos a esa imagen? No, para adelante, pues. Sí, es que it was long, sorry. Ahí está. Okay,
está,
here we are. So, ¿te puedes ir unita para atrás? Okay, here you have Moktezuma in his princely cape. This cape was made, in the description, with hummingbird flowers and turquoise. So he would have been shimmering, and the turquoise would have been this blue. And the way they are recreating this is with this specific pigment called Maya blue. Maybe here is Matlali, but this blue is very potent, you see? And when this is when he is described in Book 8 as the ruler. But when he's found dead in the Great Canal after the conquest, look at his cape. It's brown. La próxima. So with false image infrared, you take the infrared, and what you are seeing is the energy of the pigment. And then you tell that energy to have certain colors. No, it's a completely artificial thing, but that energy has this color, this energy. So it's a way to identify pigments. And indigo, the pigment used to create Maya blue, or it was used to dye our blue jeans before. Indigo has this pinkish reflection in false color infrared. So you know that this is not brown, this is actually blue. It's the same blue, but the painter has on purpose making it dull, making it dark, just as the waters. And what the painter is doing here is saying Moktezuma is not, doesn't have that, the color of turquoise, the name is Shuitu, and that it's the color of the heart of fire. Inside the fire, there's always blue. That is what propels time. That is what the ruler is. He's at the center, like the sun, the center of time. He's the propeller of time. Once he dies, that blue is not more. That energy is not there anymore. He's not Shutekutli. He's not the god of fire, of turquoise, in that sense of time. And that is why here, dead doesn't have that energy that he would have had before.
Thank you so much.